In 2023, a young Polish woman named Julia Wendell did the unthinkable. She went on Instagram and claimed to be Madeleine McCann. The world plunged into a reality show frenzy, debating photos, features, and the woman's sanity. But the most fascinating part of this story isn't Julia's hoax. It's the deafening silence and calculated inaction that came from the one source that should have reacted with desperate hope: Madeleine's parents. This connects us directly to our fear of exposure. That dread that a random event, completely out of our control, could suddenly cast light on a secret we've kept under lock and key. A person's reaction to an unexpected crisis says more about their conscience than any prepared statement, and the McCanns' reaction wasn't that of parents of a victim. It was that of guardians of a secret in panic. In this investigation, we'll ignore Julia's circus to focus on the reaction of the circus's ringmasters. We'll use her hoax as a stress test, a stone thrown into still water to analyze the ripples of panic it created. Because Julia Wendell's story, in all its bizarreness, accidentally became the greatest lie detector test the McCanns have ever faced, and the result was positively incriminating. The inciting incident wasn't a crime, but an Instagram post. In February 2023, an account named I Madeleine McCann began posting photo comparisons, pointing out similarities between a young Polish woman, Julia Wendell, and the missing girl. The most compelling detail was a coloboma in the right eye, a rare condition they both shared. Within days, the story exploded. Julia wasn't an investigator, she was an agent of chaos. A completely unpredictable and uncontrollable element injected into an ecosystem that, for 17 years, had been meticulously controlled by the McCann team. The main conflict was established instantly. On one side, the fortress of the McCanns' official narrative, built with millions of pounds in public relations, political support, and calculated silence. On the other, a 21-year-old with a smartphone and a viral story. The question wasn't whether Julia was Madeleine. The question was, how would the fortress react to an attack that didn't come from the police or a journalist, but from the chaos of the internet? The McCanns' initial reaction was silence, a heavy, strategic silence. They didn't issue a statement of hope or a cautious call to investigate. Nothing. This silence wasn't peace. It was the calm of a general watching an approaching threat, deciding how best to neutralize it without revealing their own troops' position. The world saw a bizarre hoax, but the McCann team saw a crisis of control. Julia's story was a stone thrown at a glass house they'd spent 17 years convincing. The world was made of brick, and we could all hear the sound of the impact. The tension escalates not because of what the McCanns did, but because of what they didn't do. While the world clamored for a simple response, a DNA test, the McCann team remained silent. The logic of an innocent parent would be straightforward. The chances are slim, but for a 0.01% chance it's my daughter, I'll take any test, anywhere, anytime. Their refusal to follow this logic is what turns their inaction into suspicious behavior. This is where the psychology of threat response becomes the lens of our investigation. The McCann team, led by spokesperson Clarence Mitchell, didn't treat Julia's case as a lead, but as a public relations attack. Sources close to the family began leaking to the British press that the McCanns were hurt and disturbed by the hoax, but wouldn't give a platform to a mentally unstable young woman. The strategy was clear: discredit the source to avoid addressing the issue. Paint Julia as crazy so the question, why not take the test, would seem illegitimate. The DNA test, the symbol of scientific truth, became the most feared weapon. For innocent parents, a cheek swab would be a tool of hope. For the McCanns, it became a symbol of danger. Why? Because agreeing to the test would set a dangerous precedent. It would open the door for anyone with any theory to demand their genetic material. But more deeply, the refusal revealed a pathological fear of losing control of the narrative. They'd spent 17 years building the story. The idea that a Polish hoaxer could force them into a new chapter they didn't write was apparently terrifying. Their silence wasn't dignity, it was damage control. The situation reaches a turning point when a third character enters the scene. Dr. Fia Johansson, a self-proclaimed private investigator and medium. She takes up Julia's case, brings her to the United States, and becomes her spokesperson. The media circus reaches its peak. Dr. Fia goes on TV shows, gives interviews, and makes a direct public demand. She challenges Kate McCann to provide a DNA sample. This is the point of no return. The threat is no longer just a viral Instagram post. Now it has a face, a voice, and a media megaphone. The pressure on the McCanns becomes immense. Ignoring the request now wouldn't be seen as a strategy, but as an admission of fear. The fortress of silence was under direct siege. The McCann team's response is a masterpiece of deflection. They don't respond to Dr. Fia. Instead, they leak to the press that the police are investigating and that they'll only act through official channels. It's a brilliant move. They use the police, the very institution they've so often criticized, as a human shield to avoid direct confrontation. They shift the responsibility, but the irreversible shift has already happened. Julia's hoax, amplified by Dr. Fia, forced the McCanns' hand. They, who always controlled the narrative, were forced to react to a story that wasn't theirs. The whole world witnessed not the reaction of hopeful parents, but the tactics of lawyers and crisis management experts. The silence, the refusal, the deflection strategy, all of it composed the result of a behavioral test. And the result pointed to a single conclusion: panic. The golden hook that leaves us suspended is terrifying in its irony. What would happen if, against all odds, Julia's hoax somehow ended up exposing the original truth? The climax of this story isn't a chase or a confession. It's the result of a DNA test, but not the one you think. While the world awaited Julia's test results, the McCann team made their final move. They didn't provide a DNA sample. They didn't need to. They waited. They let the circus of Julia and Dr. Fia reach its fever pitch. And then, through anonymous sources close to the family, they leaked to the press the truth they wanted the world to hear. That Julia's family in Poland had already confirmed she wasn't Madeleine and that she had mental health issues. It was a masterstroke in public relations. They didn't confront the hoax. They imploded it from within, using Julia's own family as a weapon. They positioned themselves as the silent, dignified victims, hurt by the exploitation of a sick young woman. And then, Julia's official DNA test result finally arrived. Negative. She wasn't Madeleine McCann. For the casual viewer, this was the end of the story. The hoax was exposed. The McCanns were right to ignore it. But for the behavioral analyst, this was the true climax. Because Julia's DNA test result is irrelevant. The result that matters is the panic test the McCanns were subjected to. And in that test, the result was positively incriminating. The refusal to participate, the strategic silence, the smear campaign, the use of the police as a shield, none of these are the behaviors of innocent parents. They are the calculated moves of guardians of a deadly secret, desperately trying to survive an attack they couldn't control. Julia's hoax, by proving to be a lie, fulfilled its most important function. It exposed the truth about the McCanns' fear. The dust settles. Julia Wendell fades from the headlines, becoming a bizarre footnote in the case's history. Dr. Fia Johansson moves on to her next client, and the McCanns. They return to their fortress of silence, seemingly victorious. But the victory came at a cost. The stone Julia threw into the lake may have sunk, but the ripples it created continue to spread. It's fascinating, isn't it? How an event so chaotic and false can, in the end, produce so much clarity. The Julia case served as a Rorschach test for the world. Those who believed in the McCanns saw confirmation that they are constant victims of opportunists. But for those who already suspected, their reaction was the biggest confession yet. It was proof that their narrative is a house of cards, and that a random gust of wind from an Instagram account in Poland nearly toppled it. The deepest consequence is the erosion of the McCanns' image of control. For 17 years, they were the masters of the narrative. They controlled the media, politicians, the police, but they couldn't control Julia. She was Nassim Taleb's black swan, the unpredictable event that exposes the fragility of a system that believes itself robust. The panic they displayed wasn't just about Julia. It was the panic of losing control. The panic that if a hoaxer could cause so much damage, what would happen if real evidence surfaced? The Julia case gave us a rare glimpse behind the curtain. We saw the puppet strings. We saw the PR machine in action, not to find a girl but to manage a brand crisis. And that vision is indelible. Julia's hoax didn't find Madeleine, but it found something perhaps more important: the truth about the fear haunting her. Parents, the question that remains, the one that prepares us for the resolution, is what that fear tells us about what conflict is one of the most ironic in modern criminal history. Julia Wendell, the hoaxer, was exposed. Her character arc is a tragic fall into internet oblivion. But the McCanns, by winning this battle, suffered a devastating strategic defeat. The conflict between their controlled narrative and the chaos of the internet was resolved, but at a tremendous cost to their credibility. The anchor of our investigation, the McCanns' reaction to the hoax, finds its resolution here. The silence, the inaction, and the PR maneuvers weren't signs of strength, but symptoms of panic. The promise that Julia's hoax would reveal the truth about their fear was fulfilled. The resolution isn't that Julia was Madeleine. The resolution is that the McCanns' behavior, when faced with an uncontrollable threat, is perfectly consistent with that of people who have a deadly secret to hide. The final symbol of this saga, the DNA test, is redefined. The test that proved Julia was a fraud paradoxically served as the test that proved the McCanns' panic was genuine. The final resolution is that, in the grand chessboard of the McCann case, a random delusional pawn managed for a brief moment to put the king and queen in check. And the way they squirmed to escape that check revealed more about their game than 17 years of formal investigations. In the end, the bizarre saga of Julia Wendell teaches us a powerful lesson about the nature of truth in the digital age. We live in systems of control. Governments, corporations, and in this case, individuals with a narrative to protect, all build fortresses of information. But the internet is an agent of chaos, and sometimes chaos is the most effective force for testing the integrity of those fortresses. And this makes me think about how we deal with truth in our own lives. Often the truth isn't revealed by a careful plan, but by an accident, a slip, an unexpected event that cracks our facade and exposes what's really underneath. Julia's story is a reminder that no matter how much we try to control our image and our story, we are vulnerable to the unpredictable. The great lesson here is that truth can be found in the most unexpected places, and it's often revealed, not by the event itself, but by the reaction to it. Julia's hoax was a lie, but the truth it exposed about the McCanns' panic is undeniable. It teaches us to look beyond the obvious, to analyze not just the crisis, but the response to it. Because it's in the improvisation, when the script runs out, that characters reveal who they really are. After analyzing every move and countermove in this bizarre game, my final opinion is clear and, in a way, amusing. Julia Wendell's hoax, in all its chaotic and delusional glory, was the most useful thing to happen to the McCann case in over a decade. My conviction is that unintentionally, this young Polish woman with a smartphone accomplished what millions of pounds in police investigations couldn't. She subjected the McCanns to a real-time lie detector test, broadcast to the entire world. The truth that fascinates me most is the irony of the situation. The McCanns built an impregnable fortress of narrative control, with the best lawyers, the most experienced PR experts, and the support of governments. They were prepared for any logical, calculated attack, but they had no plan for the absurd. They had no protocol for pure chaos. And it was chaos in the form of Julia that exposed the cracks in their fortress. Their panic wasn't a reaction to a real threat, but to a loss of control. And that loss of control, for people who based their survival on absolute control, was the most eloquent confession of all. They weren't afraid of Julia being Madeleine. They were afraid that the circus around her might accidentally unearth the body they worked so hard to hide. Julia's hoax was a lie, but the truth it exposed about their panic is eternal. And now, after dissecting this lesson in the psychology of panic together, I want to know what this story stirred in you. Not about Julia, but about the reaction to her. That moment when you realized their silence was louder than any scream. That aha moment when the hoax became a magnifying glass for the truth. Use the comment section to share that insight. The hoax revealed the truth. Panic doesn't lie. The behavioral DNA test came back positive. Leave your analysis, your conclusion. Let this space become a forum of behavior decoders, a community that learn to read between the lines of silence. I'll read every comment because every shared insight sharpens our collective ability to see through the fog. Sometimes a hoax reveals the truth. The McCanns' panic in the face of Julia shows how fragile their fortress is. But who are the soldiers guarding the gates of that fortress? The Tapas 7, the group of friends who were with them that night. They are the first line of defense, a wall of silence and loyalty. But what happened to them? How do they sustain this lie for 17 years? In our next video, The Pact of the Tapas 7, The Psychology of Complicit Silence, we'll perform a psychological autopsy on the group. We'll explore how loyalty turns into complicity and the price each of them pays for that silence. If you're fascinated not just by the crime, but by the psychology behind it, by the complex dance of human nature under pressure, then subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This isn't a series of videos, it's an ongoing dissection of the truth. For those who believe this deep analysis is a mission worth supporting, every gesture of support, every super chat, is an investment in clarity. It's your way of saying, keep exposing the psychology behind the lie. After all, you don't need a lie detector when you have an agent of chaos. They always reveal more.